Hi, Dr. Mindy Curry here. I'm a naturopathic doctor and I do house calls in the greater Portland area. And I've got a home office in Milwaukee. And I'm here today to tell you about mullein medicine. And these are the Verbascum species. There's over 300 species that grow mostly in the northern temperate regions. And today we're going to go over to Anne's farm and check out the mullein growing at her farm. And then later on, we'll go back to my kitchen and over to my property. And we're going to go a few different places. And I'm going to show you how to use this mullein medicinally. Okay, here we are out at Anne's farm. And this is her fabulous mullein patch. Look at these things. They are probably, oh good God, 10 feet tall. Let's take a look. Now these mullein, you're definitely going to be able to tell that's a mullein. For one, it's got these lovely yellow flowers up at the top. Now those are actually very fragrant and delightful and medicinal in their own. The leaves are what's mostly used. Look at these things. Hey, Farmer Ann, get in here and tell us how you make these giant mullein.
I'll come over and I'll stand next to it so you can see how tall it is next to me.
Hi, Ann.
Hi, everybody.
What is the secret to monster mullein?
Well, a couple of things are going on here. All right. Well, this area had a giant pile of slash on it when we moved in, so we burned that pile of slash. So this ground has a lot of burnt material in it, and I started making this edible forest garden 3 years ago, and this just started growing naturally, and I just leave it alone, and every year it's come back bigger and more prolific. So just leaving it alone and letting it do its thing on some nutritious soil seems to be the way to go.
Maybe some biochar.
Yeah, biochar.
Maybe biochar would be a good one for this. Look at those. Let's get up there and take a good peek at some of those flowers. I hope we're peeking at the flowers. It's hard to tell because I'm at arm's length. Okay, now we're going to harvest some lovely leaves. And we're looking for ones that are not damaged by insects or age, that aren't too brown or crinkly. And in this area, it's very important to harvest mullein when we see the flowers up on the stalk, because there is a look-alike that's called Foxglove, and it is pretty dangerous, and we don't want to get those. So the most common mullein you're probably going to come across is Verbascum thapsus, and that is the common mullein, and it grows about 7 feet tall. And basically, all the mulleins are generally considered to be astringent, antimicrobial, antibacterial. They're anti-inflammatory. They've got saponins in there, which are helpful for expectorant action that helps rid excess mucus in the respiratory tract. There's mucilage in there, which soothes multiple mucous membranes. And it also helps the digestive tract with diarrhea. So you might use a sitz bath for hemorrhoids to get that anti-inflammatory effect right there on your inflamed tissues on your bum. So you could use a poultice or a tea wrap around inflamed joints, bones that are inflamed, any kind of gout, basically. But most of the time I think of this as more of a support of the respiratory tract, and that's as a tea. And I use the dried leaves as a tea to support pulmonary function and generally ease the mucous membranes in the respiratory tract. We're talking about being very good for sore throats, coughs, colds, COPD, hoarseness, smoker's cough, the wildfire smoke inhalation, bronchitis. It's good for soothing and reducing asthmatic symptoms. And there's also some other uses we'll talk about, but basically, it's a beautiful plant, very fuzzy leaf. So speaking of these leaves, some people like to use these leaves for toilet paper and Well, I guess that's fine for them, but these are covered in these little tiny hairs. And for some sensitive people, those hairs can be very irritating and cause a rash. And so personally, I tend to avoid this, choose the maple leaf instead of the mullein leaf for my sensitive tissues, but to each their own. So basically, safety, mostly mullein is very safe, except like I said, for some sensitive people. But also in extreme doses, it might not be good. So in normal doses, this is very safe. Um, Now, some of the other uses, people used to smoke this as a substitute for tobacco, and it's been used in Native American smoking mixes. Uh, Another use is for the flower. The flower is a really excellent little flower, a very delightful scent. And people make a flower oil with this, and this flower oil is used to treat inflammation, especially known for earaches. Garlic mullein oil, if you've heard about that before. This mullein oil can be used for other skin complaints, for burns, rashes, minor wounds, skin inflammation in general. And basically what you're going to want to do is you're going to go up and you're going to pick the little tiny flowers off of this. And what the thing is that they don't all show up like one day. Here's all the mullein flowers you're going to collect. They actually come sort of sequentially. And so when you're picking mullein flowers, you're going to tend to pick them every day. You're going to go out and pick a few today, a few tomorrow, a few the next day, maybe for several weeks even, depending on how much mullein flowers you're wanting to pick for your oil. Generally, I don't pick too much per season, but I take and I put those in a jar of oil. My skin favorite oil, currently avocado oil, could be grapeseed oil, could be almond oil, and we'll stick those flowers in that oil. I like to put it in the fridge so that it doesn't rot. Some people suggest putting it in the sun. I get a little weary of the sun breaking up some of the compounds, but to each their own. In any case, get the flowers in the oil. If you leave them around too long, they will start to spoil. So at some point, fairly quickly, before that happens, you're going to strain that oil and make your oil products with that. For a garlic mullein oil, basically, you would take a little bit of garlic and put that into your mullein oil and soak that, say, overnight or for a few days in the sun, depending on your thoughts on that. And then you'd use that by drops into the ear, and that's good for children and adults and can really help get past an ear infection. Those are the flowers there. Aren't they beautiful? Little tiny mullein flowers. They smell delightful. I also use it in a perfumed oil that I just use on my skin every morning to keep it looking beautiful. Okay, here we are out in our land, and here's some lovely mullein. And I brought you out here because I really want you to see the difference between mullein and foxgloves. Over here we have foxgloves. These are probably the closest look-alike to mullein in this area. And as you can see, they have big spear-like leaves. They can even be a little fuzzy-ish when they're young. They're not nearly as fuzzy as the mullein here. You see the mullein has yellow flowers on the top. Foxgloves have a variety of different colors. It could be yellow, white, or pink, generally. Flowers up at the top too, but they are little socks or little mittens, whereas in the mullein are like little here's a mullein flower there, like a little daisy. Now you really don't want to get these too mixed up. Here they are right next to each other. See how close the leaves are? And yet one of these that's a foxglove, and the other one is a mullein. The problem is, these ones over here, these foxgloves, they are deadly poisonous, very poisonous. Poisonous is even small quantities. They are also used as a medicinal, but in very small doses. It's what you call a toxic medicinal. It's a drop dose medicinal. Very dangerous just to use, even if you have skills, so don't. And stay away from it. Harvest your mullein when you can see the yellow daisy-like flowers up at the tops. Don't make tea out of digitalis. Foxglove, no bueno. Okay, so now we've got these flowers, and we're just going to put them in a little bit of oil. Now right now, just enough oil to kind of go over the flowers, because we're going to go back every day for the next week and pick more flowers and put a little bit more oil in there, and then let that sit for maybe a week, but not too much longer, because it can eventually go sour. But that'll be our mullein flower oil. And here's the result. And I'm going to kind of strain that, just strain the flowers off of that. And then I'm going to add, if I want for the ear oil, add a bit of garlic. Otherwise, I'm going to just set that in a jar, probably put that in the freezer so it doesn't spoil. And with the rest of this, it's just all about washing these leaves. You're out there on the farm, it's kind of dusty. Also, these have little hairs on them, so if you can knock some of those hairs off, it's not a bad thing either. Now notice here the back side of the mullein leaf. Got a big, fat, fairly firm, whitish or lighter colored stem. And then you've got these veins kind of going off wompy, willy-nilly, mostly not next to each other. There's usually somewhat staggered there. See a big leaf, a little scalloped on the edges, but mostly kind of a big spear shape. Let those drip dry for a moment. Then we'll take them up, put them on the rack to dry for teas. Okay, now to dry these mullein leaves, I like to use this screen. It's a cheap screen from Home Depot. Just like a window screen propped up between a couple chairs in the spare bedroom. Now I like that because it's basically a clean, dry place. Wind's not going to come pick these guys up. Sun's not going to damage them. They're just going to dry out fairly quickly too. The stems will take a little bit longer. But let's just lay these guys out to dry. Okay, we're back in the kitchen. These mullein have dried out for a few weeks now. You can see they are just wonderful, big, crunchy mullein now. And they're ready to be stored. You're going to want to store these in a nice jar. This cleaned out Adam's peanut butter jar is going to be perfect for my needs. So I'm just gonna shove them in there. I'm not going to specifically chop them up or powder them or anything right off the bat. The more whole you store your dried herbs, the longer they last, a little bit longer. These are probably only going to be at their best for about a year after harvesting. You can try them in a pinch if they're a little older than that, but they're going to lose medicinal value. So that's kind of how I store them there. It's just, you can put a lot in a little jar because these are very dry and very light. That's storage. Lid on. Cool, dry place. I find a closet in the spare bedroom is a great place to keep things. Now, what I'm going to do now, I've got a pot of water boiling here, as you can see. I'm going to show you what I would do with a mullein, dried mullein. That is what I love to do, is use this for a bronchitis or a cold or a flu that's having a lot of phlegm and respiratory issues, any kind of a respiratory virus. Really great to use mullein. This is also great for smokers. They have a lot of smokers' cough or just a lot of smoky phlegm that they need to get up. This kind of a recipe would be good for smokers as well, but mostly this is more geared towards, this is a formula I like to use more for bronchitis or for really bad congestion, colds and flus and stuff. So I've got a nice cloth broth bag, which is great for making just big teas. You can also just use a big tea ball. But with mullein, there's lots of little tiny hairs on there. And some people are very sensitive to those little hairs and can actually find them irritating. So it's best to use a nice fine cloth rather than just a tea ball. I'm going to also add to that some rosemary. Rosemary is also a really great respiratory herb, really great for congestion and bronchitis. I'm going to add some fennel, or I should say some fennel seed, and that's really great for soothing. Also flavor, that adds it. That's the flavor going to be. Well, also the rosemary, very flavorful. Mullein, not very flavorful. I'm going to add to that a little bit of usnea, nature's antibiotic, also really soothing the respiratory tract, and some lungwort. You can see lungwort is a creepy little lichen that grows on trees around here. Usually it's more green than this, but this is not the freshest lungwort, but it will do. I'm going to add all those things into my little broth bag and cinch it up. And basically, I'm going to boil these on low now. Put that on a low simmer. And where is my lid? Oh crap. Everything went funny. Here's a lid, not the right one, but here's the idea. Put a lid on it and let that simmer on low, very low, for about a half an hour, because we've got some things that are a bit more beefy and need a little bit more time than just a tea bag. And then after very low simmer for about a half an hour, I'll take that and I'll drink that several times a day to treat my ailment. So now that I've shown you how to make some wonderful medicine, I want to remind you that it's very important to go see a doctor or a naturopath or at least an herbalist before starting any herbals for your conditions. For one thing, you may not really understand what your diagnosis is. You may think it's just a little bit of this and that can be treated with some plants, when it's really something serious and you're missing it, and it could be fatal. Also, there are interactions between herbs and drugs, and there's also contraindications between some of the problems you may be having and the herbs you may think you need. So don't start taking anything willy-nilly unless you're sure what's going on. And to be sure, come see a naturopath like me. I'm in Portland, Oregon. I do house calls in the greater Portland area, and I also have an office in Milwaukee.